A film set can be a dangerous place. Even with modern-day safety guidelines, actors and behind-the-scenes professionals alike face numerous hazards in their daily work. From guns accidentally being loaded with live ammunition to stunt maneuvers, leaving actors paralyzed. The film industry is no stranger to devastating accidents. From 1990 to 2014, there were at least 194 serious television and film set accidents in the US alone, and at least 43 deaths. Believe it or not, these statistics are actually a massive improvement from the early days of film. There were nearly 11,000 injuries on Hollywood sets from 1925 to 1930. 55 of those injuries resulted in death. In 1928, director Michael Curtis was so adamant that the flood scene in his film Noah's Ark looked real that he eschewed suggestions of using miniatures in lieu of real people and animals. Instead, he used thousands of extras and 600,000 gallons of water to simulate the biblical flood. The torrents of water took the unsuspecting extras by surprise, and the fear captured on camera was genuine. 3 people drowned, and dozens more suffered serious injuries. A year later, the first on-set safety regulations were introduced. The actors who stepped into film studios pre-1930s had no protection from on-set hazards. Studios had no responsibility for workplace safety, and it was up to individuals to decide which stunts they were willing to perform. But even the most cautious professionals weren't guaranteed safety from freak accidents. There is perhaps no better example of this than the tragic death of silent movie star Martha Mansfield. Martha Ehrlich was born in New York City to Morris and Harriet Gibson Ehrlich in 1899. Her eventual stage name was inspired by her mother's hometown of Mansfield, Ohio, where Harriet emigrated to from Ireland in 1885. During her childhood, Martha spent the summers with an aunt in Mansfield and came to regard the Midwest town as a second home. In the early 1910s, she and her mother moved to the Bronx, and shortly after, she was bitten by the acting bug and became determined to make a career on stage. She got her break in 1912 when she won a role in the Broadway production of Little Women. Around the same time, she began working as a dancer and artist's model, posing for renowned illustrator Harrison Fisher. In 1913, she danced in the musical Hop O' My Thumb and acted in several other stage productions in her teens, including The Passing Show of 1915, a musical revue that ran at the Winter Garden Theatre. Martha snagged a 6-month contract with S&A Studios in 1917 under the name Martha Early and appeared in 3 short films with silent film star Max Linder before he returned to France to open a movie theatre later that year. At the time, Linder was one of the best-known faces in film, having created one of the first recognizable recurring characters and possessing pantomime skills that rivaled the likes of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. With Martha speaking no French and Linda little English, the pair had an amusing time working together, she once said. It really was lots of fun. We had many a picnic out of it and much exasperation. Martha leveraged her growing experience into a stint in Ziegfeld Follies, a lavish musical revue known for its beautiful chorus girls. During her tenure with the Follies, jazz-age court photographer Alfred Cheney Johnson photographed Martha hundreds of times. Cheney had just been hired by Florence Ziegfeld, but would go on to be regarded as an arbiter of female beauty and would charge up to $1,400 for a set of a dozen prints, the equivalent of $40,000 today. Many of Cini's subjects posed nude and semi-nude in his glamorous Hotel des Artistes studio, the resulting prints helping to catapult names like Mary Pickford, Barbara Stanwyck and Zelda Fitzgerald into superstardom. Many of the surviving images of Martha Mansfield are thanks to Alfred Cini Johnson. Martha herself was not a fan of modelling, saying, "I tired of this within a year's time. It was so inactive and did not call for the use of one's facilities. I wanted to be more than a mere doll." After her season with the Follies ended, Martha made her feature film debut in 1918, starring in Broadway Bill opposite matinee idol Harold Lockwood. Tragically, Lockwood died of Spanish influenza shortly after the film premiered. Martha's final accolades on the East Coast included films produced by famous players Lasky and an appearance in Ziegfeld's The Midnight Frolic. She relocated to California in late 1919 to pursue a full-time film career. Her first Hollywood role was in Civilian Clothes, a comedy based on the 1919 Broadway play of the same name. While filming in Cuba, Martha worked in mud-filled trenches and said, "If this is the sort of life the soldier boys had to live through during the war, then God bless them for coming out of it." The following year, she starred in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a silent horror film adaptation of the classic 1886 novella by Robert Louis Stevenson. Martha starred as Dr. Henry Jekyll's sweetheart, Millicent Carew, a role originally offered to the husky-voiced Tallulah Bankhead. Leading man John Barrymore's portrayal of the dual personalities of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde earned high praise, with the Washington Post calling his performance a masterpiece, and the US Navy using stills of Barrymore in the role for its recruiting posters. While Martha did not earn equal commendation for her role, it still made her a more prominent figure in Hollywood. Following the success of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Martha was signed by Selznick Pictures. Louis J. Selznick picked her to groom as an understudy for Olive Thomas, who would ironically die tragically just months later. Like Thomas, Martha had dark hair and soft, childlike features. In 1919, she appeared as Mavis Morgan in the silent drama The Perfect Lover with Eugene O'Brien. Ultimately, though, Selznick gave up on moulding Martha for stardom. She was loaned out and freelanced to other studios long before her Selznick contract expired. In 1921, she returned to the stage on a vaudeville tour, beginning in the 1880s and continuing through the 1920s. Vaudeville was the most popular form of entertainment in the United States. The shows typically featured a dozen or more acts, ranging from comedians to singers to jugglers and acrobats. Basically, anyone who could hold an audience's attention for more than 3 minutes. Vaudeville allowed performers to truly perfect their craft. When an entertainer found an act that worked well, they repeated it over and over in front of different audiences. This type of practice is what led vaudevillians like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton to sizzle on the screen in silent films. Performers typically began in vaudeville and then transitioned to film, so it's unclear what attracted Martha Mansfield to join the vaudeville tour. Maybe she wished to flex her comedic chops or introduce herself to a larger audience. Perhaps she simply missed the stage. She told the reporter, "I believe in throwing my heart and soul into everything. There's no success in any line of work without spontaneous enthusiasm. It's the whole secret." In 1922, Martha appeared in Queen of the Moulin Rouge, playing a woman who is manipulated into dancing at the notorious Paris club to earn money for her beau to take violin lessons. That same year, she appeared in the melodrama Till We Meet Again, alongside prolific silent film act actresses Julia Swain Gordon and Mae March. Martha returned to vaudeville for another season before signing a long-term contract with the Fox Film Corporation. Her first project with them was The Silent Command, in which she starred alongside Bela Lugosi, who was still nearly a decade away from his career-defining portrayal of Count Dracula in the classic Universal horror film. Also in 1923, Martha appeared in the comedy film Potash and Perlmutter and a mystery film, The Leavenworth Case. By the fall of 1923, she had appeared in over 20 silent films. Talented, hard-working, and at just 23 years old, she should have had a long career and dozens more films in front of her. That November, Martha was filming on location in San Antonio, Texas, for the film The Warrens of Virginia, a drama about childhood sweethearts being pulled apart by the Civil War. Mansfield was playing the role of Agatha Warren, daughter of a Confederate general and love interest of the dashing Union Lieutenant Ned Burton, played by leading man Wilfrid Lytell. Her character's wardrobe consisted of wide gowns supported by hoop skirts and layers of ruffles. The cast was filming scenes for an Appomattox battlefield sequence at Brackenridge Park on Thanksgiving Day. When Martha finished filming her scenes, she climbed into a nearby automobile to rest. Moments later, her clothing burst into flames. She jumped from the car, and Wilfrid Lytell threw his heavy overcoat over her, saving her neck and face from the blaze. The fire was extinguished, but not before it caused severe burns to most of Martha's body. She was rushed to the San Antonio Physicians and Surgeons Hospital. Despite her injuries, doctors were initially optimistic about her recovery. According to one account, Martha asked the doctors, "Are you sure my face is not harmed? Won't my cheeks and neck be scarred forever?" Original plans were to take Martha back to her room at the St. Anthony Hotel to recover. But her condition worsened dramatically, and she passed away around noon the next day, November the 30th. It's still unknown what started the fire engulfing Martha's dress. Reports from that day varied, with some witnesses claiming Martha had been alone in the car and others saying she'd been with friends. In some tellings, Martha herself lit a cigarette and accidentally dropped the match onto her dress. But no one seemed to be able to confirm if Martha was even a smoker. A more sinister claim is that someone threw a match into the car either by accident or on purpose, which started the blaze. No one was ever charged with a crime, and it was widely believed that Martha's death was simply a tragic accident caused by a carelessly discarded match and a highly flammable costume. The day after her death, Martha's body was returned home to New York, accompanied by her co-star, Philip Shorey. She was interred at the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Because most of her scenes in the Warrens of Virginia were complete, production of the film continued, and Martha's final film premiered in 1924, though her role had been edited down and co-star Rosemary Hill was promoted as the female lead. It's difficult to tell where Martha Mansfield's career may have taken her, if not for that horrific on-set tragedy. She may have gone on to be a major film star. She may have toured the vaudeville circuit or could have ended up back on Broadway. Part of the reason Martha's potential is so difficult to predict is because so few of her films survived. Most of Martha's works are considered lost films, with no known surviving copies, including The Warrens of Virginia. Sadly, this is not an uncommon fate. Fewer than 20% of the features of the 1920s survive in complete form, and for American films produced before 1950, half no longer exist. Many of the lost films fell victim to fire or deterioration. Others were neglected or destroyed, as standard practice during the time was to dispose of film reels after the completion of its theatrical run. The loss of Martha Mansfield's work and the work of thousands of actors, directors and producers is devastating. Historian and archivist David Pearce, who conducted an extensive study for the Library of Congress, said, "It's a lost style of storytelling, and the best of the films are as effective with audiences today as they were when they were initially released. When you take away dialogue from a narrative story, it actually puts quite a challenge upon the creative people involved to tell the story entirely in a visual fashion. And it's that limitation, I think, which makes the films so effective." Martha Mansfield's films may be lost to time, but her story is not. It remains another tragic example of the dark side of Hollywood's golden days. Thank you for watching. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, "Well, I never."